Today I want to talk about science and the Bible, and just a lot of stuff needs to be said there. But before I say anything, I just want to make it absolutely clear: I do believe in the Bible. I believe that the Bible is God's word. I believe that it's 100% true. I believe that it has no contradictions, and I don't believe that it's wrong in any way. Now that I've said that, let me talk about something that I feel like a lot of Christians don't really separate. Just because the Bible is God's word doesn't mean that it was written in such a way that we can read it today and get the same understanding that they intended just from reading it. I believe that there has to be effort put in where we're actually reading and studying and trying to ask the question, what did they mean by this? The original writers, what did they originally mean by this? And how do I take that message now? What's changed? Okay. They didn't understand the world like we did, for instance. They had more of a communal idea. We don't really have that in America. They had more of a honor shame kind of deal going on. We don't really much have that. In fact, sometimes it seems kind of maybe shameless. There's just a lot of things that are changed, and if you don't believe that things have changed, that you can just go to it and read it and get the perfect understanding from it, you're just wrong. That's not how history works. People change, and oh no, people don't really change. Once again, you're just wrong. I know sometimes we kind of believe these things. What historical basis do we have for saying people don't really change? Well, there is none. Maybe the character of people, like the fact of how we operate for our own benefit, for instance, maybe that doesn't change. But people definitely do change. We, for instance, my generation here does not think the same way as our grandparents did. I mean, that's just a fact. We deal with the world differently. We have different priorities in life, and we don't think the same. You have to put forth effort to understand how your grandparents viewed the world, and your grandparents have to put forth a lot of effort to see how you view the world, because in their eyes it might seem like, you have this character flaw, and in your eyes, no, that's actually their character flaw. See what I mean? And so there's just kind of these differences. That's something that you have to accept. So when you're reading the Bible, it's not that the Bible is now wrong because time has passed. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you can't go to the Bible and say, I can view this as a science book. So when I'm looking at the 6 days of creation, for instance, or 7 days, however you want to say that, when I'm looking at the days of creation, I'm going to see this as a science textbook. It's going to say everything that I need to say. I mean, everything that I need to know. And any science that contradicts how I'm perceiving this to be is inherently wrong. Now, I know right now there's people who are just kind of, wait, hold on, you're not about to say evolution or anything. Calm down, calm down. The problem is that Christianity hasn't really aged well when it comes to science. And what I mean by that, let me kind of clarify. I am a Christian. I'm a pastor. Okay, so put down your rocks. What I mean by that is that when science became more at the forefront, Christianity didn't know how to respond. They tried stoning people and calling them heretics. Ostracizing them. They tried all kinds of different things of how to deal with this. Brush stuff under the rug. Take for instance the discovery of Neanderthals. Where it's like, oh, maybe this is like some people were saying maybe this is like a missing link in the evolutionary process, and other people were saying no, it's just somebody who has like a genetic defect or something like that. Well, the problem is that we found hundreds of remains, and all from different people, and science has kind of moved along from this time to show that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were living at the same time. So then, okay, they were just monkeys. No, because we see how they use things like tools or artifacts, and you see what I mean? Things like that. It's inconvenient to think about Neanderthals, so we're just gonna ignore it. Well, see, that's what I'm talking about how Christianity hasn't really aged well. Science has come to the forefront, and Christianity doesn't really know how to deal with that. And even now, Christianity doesn't know how to deal with that. So this is what they're doing. Number one, they're just denying the Bible. The Bible's false, and science will guide me all the way home. And the Bible's cute, but not really relevant for us today. That's obviously not the right view. So then another view that Christianity has tried to take is like this: I'm going to deny all the facts and choose what to believe. And if science doesn't match up with that, it's the one who's wrong. It's like, well, I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. But could it be that you are wrong? Maybe you don't understand, exactly. Maybe you don't know all the intricacies. And I do appreciate the fact that people who are not scientists are making such grand claims about science. People who are not historians are making these grand claims about history. And I'm not just talking about Christians here. Atheists and other non-Christian people do this exact same thing. Oh, I don't understand archaeology, but somehow I'm going to make the bold claim that there's no archaeological proof to back up the events of the Bible. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, people who don't know what they're talking about acting very authoritative. And that's the problem with the internet, is there's so much information and not enough actual intelligence where people are putting forth time and effort to study a field. So they just do a quick 5-second search on the internet, and then they think that they know everything, and it's just like, no, it's just so much more complicated than that. And so when you read stuff online, you're seeing, okay, here's the complete facts, here's the knowable facts, here's the filter down, here's your third-party source, and here's you. So there's this huge gap between what actually happened and your understanding of what happened, and people are just kind of like, oh no, I'm a complete know-it-all because I did a Google search. It's like, it's more complicated than that. It's just like when Christians oversimplify with the whole problem with the Neanderthals. So you have to ask yourself, where do the Neanderthals fit in? So there are options, obviously. Maybe something happened with Noah's sons, where there was something happened there with genetic variations that, whatever. We do know that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred. Maybe at the Tower of Babel, when God says that he confused their language, it was some kind of a genetic thing that happened too. See what I mean? There's a lot of things that we just don't know. Was Adam the predecessor to all these different Homo groups? Or were there other Homo groups that died out, and Adam was the first of the Homo sapiens? See, we don't really know, and that's very complicated, and just simply dismissing something isn't the right way to look at it. There's got to be a point when we say, okay, let's actually look at the evidence, let's kind of weigh it, let's come up with some theories, let's try them out, instead of just instantly dismissing them because it's inconvenient. And that's oftentimes what happens. So I believe that the earth is only a few thousand years old, so regardless of whether the Bible allows for it being older, which it does, regardless of what science shows me, I'm going to believe that it's a very young earth. See what I mean? Things like that, it's okay if you believe in a young earth. That's fine. It's okay if you believe in a flat earth. That's fine. But there's got to be some kind of genuine dialogue about facts and about truth. And that's why I say Christianity really hasn't aged well. It doesn't really know how to encounter the problem of science. So just throwing the Bible away, that's not the right way. Throwing science away, that's not the right way. There's got to be some other way that we can interact with science. We shouldn't be ignoring facts. We shouldn't be that kind of stuff. We should find some way to have a genuine discussion. Now, the problem is that Christians have been in such a flurry to prove the Bible isn't wrong, and that it still applies. So what they're trying to do is teach crazy, stupid things. A big part of this, a big person that I blame for this, is the guy that does the Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham. I blame him for this because he has such a love for the Bible, which is great. Me too. But then he mixes tradition with the truth of the Bible, and he holds to the tradition as though it's what the Bible itself said. For instance, the flood has to be a global flood. Why does it have to be a global flood? Because the Bible says it covered the whole earth. No, the Bible does not say it covered the whole earth. See, the problem is that how languages develop. Hebrew had a much broader understanding, and it kind of, as as happens, it becomes more refined. Words mean a more specific kind of an idea. But the older back you go with languages, the more they have like this kind of fluid meaning to the words, where you have one word that can mean like these wide variety of things. Like for instance, the word that is translated as, the world. Especially keep in mind that these are not a people who thought globally. And, it was often used as the whole area, the whole land, the whole group. See what I mean? Like, there's a bigger understanding there than just this. It's like in the book of Exodus, it talks about how the Israelites built these store cities. Now, in our mind, we think of a city because that's the word. That's a literal definition of the word. But that's not how they thought back then. A store city could be a building with a wall around it. It could be a city. It could be just, an enclosed space. To say that it has to be translated as a store city because you take the word apart and say, hey, and then this is another thing that we do that's mostly pointless. This is how the word was developed, and over time, it's like, okay, calm down with that. So then what you have people doing is having no idea of the original language. They take words apart and say, this comes from this, and this comes from this. So when it says store cities, it actually means this other thing. And it's like, no, you can't just do that with words. You can't say, okay, because this word developed from this and this, I'm going to take them apart and say that its original etymology is what was intended. Oh my goodness. See what I mean? There's just a certain point when you have to understand, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I'm not seeing this clearly. Especially when people get so wrapped up with tradition. And that's a big part. It's like a lot of Christians, a lot of pastors do this, right? If we change anything in the church, we're not being faithful to God. Well, what if your methods need to change while the message stays the same? Well, that's just... Do you honestly believe that we have to use pews, for instance? Do you really believe that? Because Paul didn't have pews. Do you honestly believe that we have to use the King James Version, which nobody even speaks anymore? Paul didn't use the King James Version. See what I mean? Like, you can't just say, okay, this is an era, and so to be faithful to God, we have to be faithful to that era. This is also a big problem that we're having right now with politics. People have been teaching that we have to stay faithful to a Republican Party, or now they're saying we have to be faithful to the Democrat Party in order to honor God. And it's like, no, God is higher than, he superimposes, maybe would be a better way to say that, politics. Republicans and Democrats, that's a temporary thing. It won't exist for forever. And so I think that maybe a better option than Ken Ham's solution of stick with tradition is maybe to question our tradition. We've been teaching this for a long time. Are we right in this? Is there a theological problem with that? If we accept that the world is a lot older than we assumed by tradition, does that take away anything of the truth of the Bible? No, the Bible never says it was young. Does that take away anything of the truth of the gospel, of Christianity? Any core doctrines lost there? No. So we've made this huge problem over something that's not a big deal and made ourselves look like idiots while we're doing it too. All because of people like Ken Ham who take their love for the Bible, great, and combine it with their love for their own tradition, which is not great. There's got to be a point when we look at the evidence and we look at the Bible and we say, am I understanding this correctly? The traditions that we've formed, are they correct? And then we have to ask the bigger question, has Christianity always believed this? And I think that we'd be surprised at some of the answers. So now that takes us to the idea of evolution. You don't have to believe in evolution. You don't have to. You do have to find some way to address the evidences of evolution. If you can give a good explanation, which I believe many have. One guy, I have one of his books somewhere. Michael Behe, I don't know how the crap you say his name. He wrote the Darwin's Black Box. He wrote, what is that? Darwin Devolves. These are genuinely good answers to evolution, which once again shouldn't be seen as okay, one and done. The thing about evolution is, since it's a scientific practice, it's always evolving in its form, and so our responses to evolution, if we don't believe in evolution, then it needs to be something that always evolves too. You can't use the same answers from 20 years ago when the theory has changed. Some people are still trying to answer the original hypothesis of evolution when that original hypothesis has changed drastically. Kind of an important point. So, but with that being said, you don't have to believe in evolution. You don't have to disbelieve in evolution. There are many ways to interpret the facts of what are used for the facts of evolution. And there are many unanswered questions. Evolution does this all the time. There's unanswered questions, and you just gleam over it. Because we believe in evolution, we don't have to explain this, because evolution. It's like, yes, I get the concept of evolution, but that doesn't make sense in this case. Like, for instance, it takes too long for a creature to evolve from one species to an entirely different species. How do we explain the Cambrian explosion? Like, that doesn't even make sense. It's time that evolution start upping its game and stop making fun of Christians and tweak the theory. I believe personally that neither groups are at a full understanding. I believe that there are parts of evolution that could be true and parts of creationism that are true. And I think that the problem is that it's more with our understanding more so than the actual theories, that people are taking evolution and maybe pushing it farther than it needs to go, and then adding on top of that proves that there's no God. And I think the creationists are just responding and reacting instead of thinking logically. No, evolution can exist. No form of evolution can exist. There's absolutely no idea. It's like, well, hold on. What about the flu virus? You could say evolves every year. You could say mutates, however you want to say. Once again, now I'm not saying that, necessarily we need to push it to the full extent of everything that has evolved from one organism by itself. Yeah, that seems like a little bit of a big statement there. You kind of get what I'm saying here? There's a lot of aspects to evolution that is like, well, that kind of sounds like you're talking about a creator. No, Mother Nature just did it. So you named God Mother Nature, but you're still attributing it to a divine presence, so that doesn't really solve the problem. But with that being said, the moral of what I'm getting at is that science and Christianity don't have to be at odds, and that Christianity has not aged well with the presence of science, and it's probably about time that we stop and re-examine our traditions, re-examine what science really says and what we're assuming that it says, re-examine what the Bible really says and what we're assuming that it says, and start having genuine discussions, trying to figure things out, trying to move forward instead of constantly back and forth between, there is no God and there is a God. Maybe we could step that aside and actually look at the evidence, because there's nothing that disproves God, and there's nothing that disproves God. In fact, Paul kind of made it more complicated by his really big statement that, nature and everything that we see is proof of God. And so that kind of brings us to a whole nother level of discussion, which, obviously we don't have time for right now. I will continue this discussion on the next video. But I want you to just stop and think genuinely about, how has Christianity responded to science? Do you think it's done a good job, or no? And feel free to post down below. What are some things that you think need to happen in order for us to have a more mature conversation about science, especially as religious people?